Hey, hey! Today we will be a bit grim, as we usually are when we talk about dead people and dead civilizations throughout history. Welcome to the Moose Lady Academy, and today we will talk about, human sacrifices in the Iron Age? Question mark. And then, of course, I am mainly focusing on the Scandinavian area during the Iron Age. Exciting, but again, a bit grim. This is actually a topic that I get questioned about quite some times now by you guys through Instagram mainly. And that is what I want to do going forward actually, is that I will take the topics that you guys wanted me to discuss. You gave me a lot of suggestions, so thank you so much for that. And if you want to drop me a request for future videos, you are more than welcome to write in my Instagram DMs about it. And I will try to get to it, as fast as possible, but again, I've gotten a lot of suggestions, so I can't promise it will be in the next video. But I will write it up on my whiteboard and I will get to it sooner than later. Hear ye, here's your disclaimer, okay? This video covers a very upsetting kind of topic. I will display upsetting imagery. I will talk about human sacrifices. If you've clicked into this video, I don't know what you expected, but here is your chance to click off if you're not into that, because upsetting topics will be covered in this video. So if you're not into that, here's your chance. Click, click, click. And since Oscar is mainly into runes anyway, and learning about maybe a bit more, friendly topics, I will put him over here. Because he's of age, but he's faint of heart. Human sacrifice is nothing new under the sun. This is something that many cultures all around the globe have partaken in, unfortunately. It is kind of wild for us today to imagine how normalized this has been in different times, in different societies. This has been a practice in ancient China, in Mesoamerica, in the Nubian kingdom, all around Europe, etc. What is not maybe covered as much is the northern European parts of the world and Scandinavia when it comes to human sacrifices. I do remember that it was a part of the earlier seasons in the Vikings TV show where Ragnar and his gang goes to ancient Uppsala in order to sacrifice. And then you as a viewer become creepily aware that, they're not just going to sacrifice, plants and goats and stuff. They're actually going to sacrifice humans as well. And that might come across like this stereotype, this ancient barbaric Viking, this bloodthirsty warrior. Like, obviously, that must be a stereotype, right? And that's basically what this video will be. Let's talk about how accurate that stereotype actually is and how violent the Vikings and the people of the Iron Age in Scandinavia in general could actually be. And I will also include, some parts of Northern Europe in here, because context matters, First, before we can talk about a subject, I want us to understand, what does the word sacrifice mean? Like, what is that? So, what does sacrifice mean? If we were to open up a book, a lexicon of words, it will say something along the lines of, it is to suffer a loss, give up, renounce, injure, or destroy, especially with an ideal in mind, belief, or some kind of end to something. So if I'm going to put that in like an example, that is like, I sacrifice my nighttime sleep in order to go up at 5 in the morning to help my kids finish off the new chapter in Star Fox Adventures on the GameCube. Then I have sacrificed my sleep for the greater good. A sacrifice could also be made in order to, please a god or a deity, in order to get something back, health, good crops that year, whatever. Whatever outcome the humans sacrificing something want to get in return from that deity or from the belief system that they have. In some cultures, animals are still very much being sacrificed in order for the group sacrificing them to have a pleasant outcome of something. And this is still not a very, unheard of or uncommon thing. It still takes practice within branches of the largest religions today. Sacrifices can also be in the shape of valuable objects like gold, jewelry, swords, weaponry, as well as food and drinks and crops. And again, this is the truth for most cultures throughout history. They have sacrificed something, or someone's. And if you have watched my Jul video on this channel, then you know that in Scandinavia today, it is still very much a thing, a tradition that you sacrifice porridge for the tomte, the nisse, the vette, in order for him to upkeep your house and keep your family healthy and well. So this is very much also a modern type of sacrifice going on still today. And there are so many more examples of this, like modern examples. If you guys come to think about anything from your culture, please let me know in the comments, because I would love to know what comes to your mind about sacrifices and modern times. But let's move forward, or backwards, depending on how you think about it. Were there acts of human sacrifices being committed in Scandinavia during the Iron Age? So I'm just gonna start off with being very direct and short. Yes, it happened. But I first want to discuss, when did it start taking place in Scandinavia? And this is a hard one because, in order to prove a thesis or a theory, you need some kind of evidence, right? And the evidences we have for human sacrifices can be pretty vague due to completely natural reasons. There's a lot of time that has passed. And also, how do you know? It is very hard sometimes to figure out what is the cause of death for the person that you find. This is the same type of argument I see a lot when we talk about warriors in ancient societies. If they are buried with a sword, but they have no skeletal injuries, people go like, oh, especially if it's a woman being buried, oh, but they don't have any bone injuries, so obviously they weren't a warrior. But what these people don't consider or take in mind ever, and what this argument as a whole never considers or bring up, is that there are so many more injuries you can sustain as a human being that will kill you, that has nothing to do with your skeleton. For example, if you were to get a sword, straight into the stomach, and that might kill you. And that might not leave any scars on your skeletal tissue at all. You can die from drowning. You can die from having cysts in your stomach, in your brain. You can die from a bad case of diarrhea and you get, very dehydrated. These things are not always as obvious as we would want them to be. But, however, in some cases, we are lucky enough to actually find evidence that really, really speaks for that it is a very ancient practice to sacrifice human beings, even in Scandinavia. This is the raspberry girl. She was found during the 1940s in Västergötland, Sweden. And as with the gentleman that I covered pretty recently in a video, the Bredgårdsman, who also was found in a similar place, the place where the raspberry girl was found had once also been the bottom of a body of water. What makes this woman very, very different from the Bredgårdsman, however, is that she is not considered categorically as a skeleton. She is what we call a bog skeleton. And that is a huge difference. A bog skeleton is very similar to a bog body. Maybe you've heard of those. It is where human remains have been kind of, conserved into the bog. There's a very little oxygen there, and the environment conserves the body differently from if they were just, put in the soil. This is not a bog body, this is a bog skeleton. And bog skeletons are mainly skeletons, but they have kept some type of tissue, which is very cool. One very famous example of this is the Stenbocksman, also from Sweden, and he has remained all of his hair. That's the soft tissue that is still on his skeleton. Absolutely amazing. So the raspberry girl that they found, she was mainly a skeleton, right? But she still had her stomach. What they did with the raspberry girl is that they understood pretty early on that this is not whatever skeleton here. We need to really investigate this. So they dug up a big, big square around where her skeletal remains were, and they pulled it up, put it in a special box, and they drove it to a lab to, investigate there. She was dug up in a laboratory and not at the site. They carefully removed the dirt around her, and not only did they find evidence of that she had indeed been tied up when put into this body of water, this bog, she had had a last meal. She had eaten a ton of strawberries before she was killed. And these raspberry seeds, they can still be viewed today. Her last meal being raspberries, it shows us that she died during the Neolithic summer. She was around 20 years old when she passed away, and she was also around 144 centimeters tall. Why I mention her as an example of human sacrificing is because where she was found and how, like how her body's position was when they found her. This is a theme you will see going onwards with this video. You will see why this is considered a human sacrifice, because I will pull up so many more examples from the Iron Age as well that is so similar to this case. So you just wait for that context, okay? Don't be too trigger happy with the comments. Where she had passed away, again, there was a body of water, there was a lake there. Seems like her legs had been tied up in a manner where she had died face down, sitting with her legs bent. Like she had been sitting something like this, which is not a natural position to die in if you are like this and then face down into a body of water. You are probably tied up then. Her hands were probably also bound. This is, however, more of a speculation that her hands were also bound. Not too big of a reach because she was face down. Otherwise, she would have been able to, But what happened was that the man who found her, he was out there digging because it was then a field. So what happened was that he accidentally got one of her hands on his shovel. That was how he found her. So that evidence is kind of, destroyed. But again, it isn't too far of a reach to think that, her hands probably were also tied behind her back like that. Of course, that one who lacked the context that will come in this video later on would say like, oh, but maybe she was just murdered, And I mean, that's valid. But with the huge amount, with this other human sacrificing taking place all over Scandinavia and Northern Europe during similar times and later on, this specific case, yes, you could, if you only look at this case, oh, but maybe she was murdered. But if you look at the big context of things, it becomes pretty clear. And it isn't just human sacrifices that have taken place during the Neolithic era either. People have also sacrificed a huge amount of burned flint, for example. They have sacrificed these big stone axes, these flint axes as well. And this they have also sacrificed in bodies of water, because bodies of water and sacrifice go like hand in hand like that. It is very, very, very common for humans to sacrifice into water. It is all of these things together. She has had a last meal, she has been bound up, she has been in a body of water, and there is so many other sacrifices that has been made during this era in the surrounding area. So it is not too far-fetched to believe that she was indeed a victim of being sacrificed. And I want to bring this example up because this is one of the earlier examples of human sacrificing in Scandinavia. Let me tell you, even though this is one of the earlier finds we have made, it absolutely do not stop there. It's just, it snowballs. It's getting a little bit dark. I had to turn the lights on. It's a storm outside. I don't know if it can come through in the video, but it's thundering and raining excessively. So what about the Iron Age now and the topic of human sacrifice? And here I really need to section the chapters of this video up because there is so much information. And if I just throw it all at you at the same time, you won't know what hit you. There will be no order anymore. And at Moose Lady Academy, we are so much about the order, okay? I want to start off with some written source material first. And then I want to go on to the actual archaeological evidence and what it says together in context of the written source material, and also what it says without the context of the written source material, you know, to put everything into perspective. If I were you, I would grab a cup of coffee and maybe a little snack, maybe some chocolate or something, because you are in for a ride. So I think we can agree something, you and I, right here and now, that us human beings, we are very special creatures. I don't even dare to guess how many psychologists have turned themselves mad in order to try to figure out why we are as we are. I mean, there's a reason why psychology is its own science. The human brain is crazy by default. Us as a species, we have always been very destructive, it seems. We are very creative, but also very destructive as a species. I want to touch upon the psychological side of human sacrificing, because that's also a part of the written source material. So according to the scientists René Girard and Walter Burkert, they displayed in each of their theses during the 1970s how violence is something that us humans cannot get away from. It is part of our nature. It is some built-in aggression within us that needs to be maintained and channeled in different ways, sometimes in the most strange ways. Theses, they are very interesting to read. Even if they are from the 1970s, they have some years on their necks by now, but they are very interesting. In Girard's example, that there is no difference between the human sacrifice being made and the animal one, as long as the humans is not a full-blown member of the society which they are being sacrificed. You know, they are not a full-blown member of the group that is sacrificing them. Who could be outside of this group? Who could be the ones that are not us, the others? So the others, it could be humans from other places, it could be children, because believe it or not, children has not always been considered full members of society. It could be slaves, for example. Because of this distinction that this person is not like us, therefore it is not too far off from the animal sacrifice, which is very, you know, on surface level, it's very clear, like, yeah, this is not a human. And that is Girard's take. I do not agree or disagree. I just find it interesting to think about. It has had a great influence how we, after the 1970s, have thought about human sacrificing and sacrifices being made in the past. And now here comes my opinion. I think it's a bit too black and white to think that human sacrifices have only occurred towards the other, towards someone who is alien to the group where this is all taking place. I think there must be a bit more religious nuance to that conversation, because it cannot always be the black sheep being sacrificed, because we cannot clearly see that pattern in the archaeological evidence that we have found. In some cases, absolutely, that might be 100% what has happened, but not in all of the cases, and not in all of the cases in ancient Scandinavia. An anthropologist by the name Maurice Bloch talks more about the point of view of the actual sacrifice, like the person being sacrificed, and a term called rebounding violence. And rebounding violence is like a bouncing back kind of violence that goes both ways. The one being sacrificed is using a belief to use violence upon themselves. And the one doing the sacrificing, the sacrificer, so to say, not the victim, but the one doing the deed, they are made to use violence towards someone else in the name of this belief or deity or whatever is going on there psychologically. That there is probably more nuance to it than just, oh, this is an outsider, let's sacrifice them to the gods or whatever. And the one being sacrificed could actually maybe, in this society where this is taking place, uplift their own social status, even though to us they are being completely crazy and taking their own lives, basically. They're giving their own lives. But in this context, in this time, in this society, it makes sense for them to be socially uplifted and to maybe even be redeemed to some extent if they are the sacrifice for the gods or deities or what have you. Whichever it is, human sacrifice will always and have always been tied to violence. Violence is a part of it. And it's absolutely fascinating, these thought patterns for what is going on in a group psychologically when things like this take place. And now I want us to take a journey throughout the historical source material. Some of it, at least. Not all of it. Then we're here for a couple of days. So I think it's appropriate to talk about Odin now, right? When we're talking about human sacrifices. The sacrificial context to him can be found in the Havamal, in the stanzas 138 to 139, where he sacrifices himself for knowledge. And he hangs himself, and he stabs himself with a spear, and he hangs there for a couple of days and nights in the Yggdrasil, the world tree. Some have translated a part of these stanzas to mean basically that I wasn't sacrificed for bread or for cattle. And when you build upon that, then you can build a theory like, I wasn't sacrificed for bread or for cattle, so maybe that can tell us a little bit about the human mind when it comes to actual human sacrifices, historical sacrifices, where real people have been sacrificed, and maybe it was for crops, for bread, for food, or was it for survival of the cattle, or, And that is some people's translation and interpretation of those lines. This is where I raise my finger, but, here comes my take, okay? This translation of these stanzas, I personally do not agree with them. They are fascinating. I love that line of thought. Super fascinating. I don't agree to that translation and interpretation, though. To me, it has kind of been twisted a little bit too much to fit this narrative like, maybe we can figure out why they were sacrificing people through these stanzas. In the original text, to me, it looks more like it says something along the lines that no one fed me or gave me a drink, which would be just a part of Odin sacrificing himself. And I think it's fair to put up both translations and interpretations so you can wrap your own mind around it. It's important that you know that both exist, and what I think as well. Nonetheless, this is a huge sacrifice to make. Even though Odin is not per se a human being, he is as close as we can get in that specific part of the Eddas to human sacrifice. And Havamal is originally thought to have been made in the 900s, but it was written down sometime during the 1200s, so 13th century. There are older sources, however, than the Eddas when it comes to human sacrifice. Thanks to the Romans, actually, we have great insight to what was going on with these people during the Iron Age. So, in 105 BC, a horde of Roman soldiers ran into a bunch of different mixed Germanic tribes. And they were mixed into a big army. The Cimbrians or Cimbrians are mentioned to be at the forefront. This is a Germanic tribe from Jylland, Denmark, so Scandinavia. And this all took place by the biggest river in Western Europe, Ren. And the Romans, they got their butts kicked, to put it lightly. The Germanic tribe killed off 80,000 Romans there, where only around 10 of them managed to escape and managed to get back to Rome and tell what took place there by the Ren. And what they accounted for really made the rest of the Romans very confused in terms of cultural differences. Because instead of using the enemy's, armors, belongings, and so on, the Germanic tribes have destroyed everything. The valuables, the silver, the gold, you guessed it, they threw it into the water. It wasn't looted or taken for themselves. They had sacrificed it into the water. And again, this is something that has gone on a lot in Scandinavia as well, sacrificing to the water. And the Germanic tribes, they had not stopped there. They had taken all of the horses from the Roman soldiers and they have sacrificed them as well. These living horses down down into the water, sacrifice them as well. It would make sense for them to just take those horses or sell them or keep them or use them in further warfare, but no, they got sacrificed. And the prisoners, they hung them up around all of the trees around there. To the Romans, this type of way of behaving, how the Germanic tribes were behaving, is called animus. So it is like this uncontrolled and unexplainable anger, rage that they used, which was a bit foreign to the Romans. This also explains why sometimes the archaeological sites and the diggings and the evidence contains horses, gold, armor, all of the shebang, but no bones. Because if they were hung up, then they would have been eaten probably by birds and, whatever other creatures could get to them. This is also covered by someone we have mentioned earlier on this channel, Cornelius Tacitus. He also accounts for how the Germanic tribes hangs people from the trees, or they are being put into pits in the earth and basically tortured and sacrificed. They are being, riled up in this very, very violent scene while they're being sacrificed. Yet again, this other attack that took place, some survivors managed to get back to Rome and explain what happens. And thanks to these survivors, the Romans could actually locate. They could send more people there to see what happened to their soldiers. Their bodies had just been left there as they had been sacrificed. They were dangling up in the trees and they were in the pits and they were everywhere. They were just left there. As well as it is said that altars had been raised at the spot where all of these people had been killed and sacrificed, and how the higher ranked officers, their heads have been, cut off and put on spikes and left there. So these stories from Tacitus, they have been underlined by archaeological finds. So even though it cannot be like 100% confirmed, because we cannot ask anyone, which is such a shame, but we cannot ask anyone what happened thousands of years ago. It is believed that the place where these people were sacrificed, a place called Kalkriese in today's Germany. And let's get back to the Danish people that we mentioned a little bit earlier. There is a place called Alkenenge in Denmark where so much human bones have been found. So much. And since the bones date to around the year 0, they haven't been put there in, different batches. It is believed that this could be some defeated army that have been sacrificed into the water as well. There was also a lot of weapon sacrifices made in the water there. But those weapon sacrifices are not from the same time. They are not contemporary with the bones. And this is undoubtedly like another place where sacrifices have been made into the water, because there was not 1 or 2 bones found there. It was over 2,000 bones found at the same place that dates from the same time. And that also says something, and it also further underlines and adds credibility to the Roman sources. We also have written sources in form of the Anglo-Saxon monk, Beda Venerabilis, telling us how King Peda of Mercia puts his enemies' heads and arms up, probably on sticks, at the battlefield where he has won battles. And also then Beda talks about how his successor, who is a Christian, then takes them down and buries them into the soil instead. Also, the Rus are said to have put their enemies up on spears, according to Leo Diaconus, a historian active during the later parts of the 900s. So now we're talking Viking Age. And in Sweden, skulls have been found in connection to a temple in Uppåkra, and these skulls shows signs of also being put up for the elements, because they have like scratch and bite marks on them, probably from, a dog kind of creature. We also have the account of Adam of Bremen, when he travels to ancient Uppsala in Sweden, how bodies were indeed hung in this sacred grove, how bodies were hung and sacrificed. So these weren't like enemies, these were sacrifices, human sacrifices, and they were hung next to animals in these trees. These were sacrifices that was made to the gods then. And of course, we must talk about one of the most mentioned written sources from the Viking Age, when it comes to internet at least, from what I've seen, Ibn Fadlan. In his account, where he writes about how he run into Scandinavians by the river Volga during the 900s, there is parts about how a woman gets sacrificed together with horses. This burial ritual takes place because a Scandinavian chieftain or jarl has passed away. And the violence does indeed, according to Ibn Fadlan, the violence is a part of the whole ritual. Like the men are riling up the horses so that they, grow completely, they are running in panic and so on, and they are getting sweaty, and they are, they're scared for their lives. And it was apparently it was a very loud ritual taking place, very violent, and then they end up killing the horses and putting them in the grave with the chieftain or the jarl. And the woman runs into the same fate as these poor horses that get put into together with the chieftain. The violence is a part of it, and the violence is not just killing. The violence is that you are stressing, you are, being loud. It's a very much fear taking place and violence in this ritual. So it's baked in there with it. And while we are speaking about, stressful violence, let's talk about the blood eagle. And this can indeed also be found in written sources. In the saga of the Orkney Earls, which is found in Snorri Sturluson's Heimskringla, the author of this story is, however, not Snorri. The author is unknown. This saga goes over the lives and the politics of the different jarls or kings during the 900 to 30th century. And the Heimskringla is from around the 30th century. Amongst other celebrities from history, it mentions Harald Finehair, the king of Norway. And it is in chapter 4, the earldom in the Norse line 872 to 1231. This is where we run into the blood eagle for the first time. It is executed on none other than the son of Harald Finehair. So what happens is that Halfdan Halfegg, the son of Harald, is coming for Einar. Because there are different powerful men going around and beating each other up and killing each other during this time in order to take over their kingdoms and whatnot. So Halfdan, he is coming to free Einar from his kingdom on Orkney. This all ends up in Einar carving the blood eagle on Halfdan's back. Let me read you a quote from this tale. Next morning they found Halfdan Halleg on Rinnar's hill. The earl made a blood eagle be cut on his back with the sword, and had his ribs severed from the backbone, and his lungs pulled out. Thus he gave him to Odin as an offering for victory, and sang this song. There's no questions about what happened there, what the blood eagle is, and that the blood eagle is made as a human sacrifice to Odin. And some experts, they think that these are just, medieval fantasies about the very violent and macho Vikings. But if we're going to be completely honest and look at the actual society that these people were living in during these times, and also purely anatomical, there is nothing hindering this from actually being a real thing. And I think it is more telling and more of a historical, romantical rewriting of history when you try to claim that, but the Vikings, they wouldn't do that. They absolutely would. They absolutely would. And this procedure of making this specific type of offering towards Odin, the blood eagle, it is mentioned around 10 times in different written historical sources. In the Knutsdrapa, it is Ivar the Boneless, the son of Ragnar Lodbrok, that makes a blood eagle on King Ella of Northumbria. However, we lack the evidence, the archaeological evidence of saying that these people did indeed exist, because we haven't found them. And even if we did find them, how would we know that we found them? So, now we have gone over a couple of written sources that mention human sacrifice in different degrees. Now, I want to look into the archaeology side of things more. Or at least, some kind of evidence in some cases. Evidence is, It's an umbrella term, and some of them are more clear than others. Since we were just speaking about the blood eagles, let's continue from there, right? Here we have Bracteate 7 from Denmark. It is deemed to be from the years 450 to 540 AD. What these runes say is still not completely certain, but if you look at the figure, so here we have a human figure with what looks to be a sword. He seems to be reaching into the other human figure's chest, almost like he's pulling. As far as evidence goes, this is a bigger reach than if we actually found a skeleton with the ribs moved away, literally, as the written sources say and tell us. We also have this picture stone from Gotland. Let me just go over what it is that we are seeing on this specific part of it. We have a warrior hanging from his neck from a branch. Then we have what is now known as a valknut, someone standing in front of some kind of bench or table of some sort, and above is the valknut. It looks like someone is having something done on their back while being held, while a big bird cloak is being handed. And this big bird cloak could be an eagle, since it is bigger than the birds that are flying above in this scene. We also have snakes coming out of the sky and an army in the background. I mean, could this be a scene where the blood eagle was executed in honor of Odin? With the earlier context, I think it is not all that unbelievable. We also have this on the Gallehushorn from Denmark. Here we can see a man that is cut up without a head. And this comes after what looks like some ritualistic dance is going on with weapons just before this sacrificial kind of scene. Let's talk a little bit about Adam of Bremen again, who went to ancient Uppsala to look how the Vikings were doing their thing. He did not only talk about, sacrifices being hung up in trees, he also talked about sacrifices being pushed down into wells. These human beings have actually been found in Scandinavia, in wells. One example comes from Trelleborg in Denmark. People, they are from the same era as when Adam of Bremen went to ancient Uppsala. And in this case, it is children that have been found in these wells together with animal bones as well. And this is like these similar things have been found throughout like different places in Scandinavia. It's not just in Uppsala where Adam of Bremen went, and it's not just in Denmark where we have found the children in the deep wells. But again, if we talk about ancient Uppsala, these type of water sacrifices have also been found there. There we have found many, many humans as well as horses. These people and horses that have been put into the Bokaren in ancient Uppsala, they have been through tremendous violence. A lot of violence have been subjected to these people and animals. And it is too many of them, both people and animals, for it to be just, a random murder, a random crime, a random horse that has been slaughtered or whatever. There are too many at one place for it to not be, a systematical thing. These skeletons, they also span from, wide ranges in different eras during the Iron Age. And if we go back to the ancient Romans and their talk about how these Germanic tribes hung people up in the trees, which is a common theme that we keep coming back and back and back to all the time when we talk about human sacrifice. This is also a very common theme in Scandinavian art from the Iron Age. If we, for example, look at the Överhogdals tapestry from Sweden, we have what could be a sacred tree, maybe Yggdrasil, some have suggested, and we have all of these animals and humans surrounding it. Could these be symbols for sacrifices, maybe? A more on-the-nose kind of example comes from yet another picture stone from Gotland. Here we have a whole bunch of people being hung in the same fashion as on the earlier stone. If you look at their feet compared to the standing people, they are clearly hanging. We also have the Oseberg tapestry, not this tapestry, the other one. And here you see many men hung in a tree with some kind of ritualistic scene going on around them. Here's a little swastika and the branches, they are snakes. And if you look at them, they are clearly dangling from the tree. I have mentioned someone called the Moose Man before in my video about Viking body mods with the file teeth. And some people got a bit curious about the Moose Man grave, so I thought this is a golden opportunity for me to shed some more light upon that specific grave. In the Moose Man grave, there is a young man that has fallen victim to the act of human sacrifice. It is a double grave found in Birka, Sweden. This sacrificed man, he had no personal belongings in this grave, and his skeleton had been bent in a very unnatural position, just as with the Raspberry Girl, which we touched upon in the beginning of the video. So his right arm was behind his back, and his left arm and left leg are in a very weirdly bent position, as if they have been bound together. The right leg was also very strangely bent upwards towards the upper body. The head was also separated from the body. Only, so to say, personal belongings he had, it was other bones from goats or sheep, which probably wasn't personal belongings at all. They probably also were sacrificed. The skeleton underneath the man, however, was found with a lot of personal belongings, a lot of grave goods, and all of that, so to say, like normal stuff you would find in a more well-off kind of grave. These double graves, they are actually not as uncommon as we would probably like them to be. But actually, you know, proving the sacrificial part is kind of challenging due to, you know, things have been worn down throughout time and so on. So the sacrificial part is not always very easy to spot. Even if you find a double grave, it is not always super easy to spot. The Moose Man grave is a great example where it is kind of like, we can kind of see what's going on here. And there are other examples from Scandinavia with the same pattern as the Moose Man grave. Another clear example comes from Denmark, where the upper skeleton has been bound and also beheaded. That grave is from Leire, Själland in Denmark. In Fjälkinge in Sweden, we have yet another example where the upper skeleton has been bound, but not only that, the upper skeleton has been bound and burned as well. And they have had their lower legs cut off. And the example of the Moose Man grave, the upper skeleton, the young man that has been sacrificed, his foot was also missing. Maybe this was a way to keep these sacrificed people from running away from their masters somehow. Now, as the last part of these sub-chapters of this video, I want to touch a little bit upon bog bodies. Because the bog bodies are also tied into human sacrifices very much. And then after we have touched on the bog bodies, I want to actually take you to a sacrificial bog as well. The practice of throwing people into bogs is something that is also mentioned by Tacitus. This came across as some kind of punishment because someone, like the people being thrown into the bogs, they have done something immoral or wrong or committed a crime of some sort. And the people entering the bogs, they could be nailed to the bogs and so on as punishment. They had to wear ropes around their necks entering this place, this holy sacred grove, we can call it. And where Tacitus might have only seen, through his cultural lens, he might have seen these people as they were being punished, they were criminals, and they were being fed to the bogs as criminals. A more modern view on the topic is, however, that these are not just punishments, these are sacrifices being made into the bogs. Last warning, if upsetting pictures will come now, because bog bodies look way more upsetting than skeletons. Last warning, okay. The oldest bog body in Denmark is called Haraldskjærkvinnan. She has been dated to have died during 450 BC, so close to the line where Scandinavian Bronze Age turned into Scandinavian Iron Age. And when the people who found this woman, they tried to pull her up, And they couldn't, because she was nailed with these nails through her legs and the stomach and the arms. So she was nailed put onto the bottom of the bog. She had died naked. Her clothes had been put next to her, as well as her hair has been kept. And she was around 40 years old when she died, and she had long, long hair. And what's interesting with this hair that has been kept is that scientifically you can actually investigate the hair, and the experts could make out around 4 years of her life where she has been during 4 years of her life before she got killed. Absolutely fantastic. And with this example, it is not 100%. It's very hard with this example to be 100%, but it seems like her throat has been cut. It has been indeed probably sliced open. And this also indicates some sacrificial circumstances. Then we have the Tollu man, which is also from Denmark. This is another bog body that is incredibly well preserved. You can even see that he has had his beard freshly shaved, and his hair has been shaved, and he's still wearing, you remember what Tacitus said about those, ropes around the necks? He's still wearing his. It has been preserved. He was also around 40 years old when he died, and you can clearly see that he has been, well groomed before his death. He has been prepared for this. He was found in kind of a fetal position, and he looks very, peaceful, almost like he's sleeping. It's very eerie. Another bog body example is the Gråballeman. He does not look peaceful. He looks terrified, which is very disturbing. He has been bound in connection to his death, being put into the bog. And he was around 30 years old when he died. And both him and the Tollu man have, just like with the Raspberry Girl, they have been fed a last meal before they have died and been put into the bog. This example that comes from Germany is probably, it's the most disturbing example of all, but I think it's an important example of a bog body because it tells you so much about the values and the type of society that actually was during the Iron Age in these times. This is the bog body of a 7-year-old boy. He had been bound, and also like in the Danish examples, he had been fed a last meal before being put into the bog, sacrificed around the year 50 BC. He was found in the Kaihausener bog, and he had also been put through immense amounts of violence. It says something about this society during the Iron Age, where children have been proven again and again and again to have fallen victims for human sacrifices. I have seen such a big resistance online with other content creators that have talked a little bit about this topic. There is this huge resistance from people that they do not want to believe that that people have done these things. But you have to understand that the Iron Age times in Northern Europe and in Scandinavia, it was very violent. It was so violent, and that violence did not only come across between adults. It wasn't all these, cozy mead-drinking people who were into Thor and Odin and who just killed each other honorable when they were going on quests to far-off lands where they were going to conquer and find glory and, It was that too. But the truth of the matter was that these people were extremely violent and their society was extremely unfair and violent. These people, they had serious convictions, like hardcore convictions that resulted in these type of atrocious actions towards even the most innocent in a society. It wasn't just, old men getting thrown off the ättestupa because they had lived so long and now it was time for the gods to take them or whatever, like in the tales that get told about these times. These were real people, like these were human beings being sacrificed for whatever, whatever happened, whatever they believed in, and they were probably scared for their lives, many of them probably didn't have any choice in the matter at all, whether they were to be sacrificed or not. It was probably not a mutual understanding between people, especially not the children. It isn't just around Scandinavia, it is Germany, it is the Netherlands, it is Great Britain, it is Ireland, and so on. The fact that these people have been put down naked, it says something about the ritualistic act of it, where they become their naked bodies become part of something bigger than themselves. We yet again come back to Ibn Fadlan's description of this very violent sacrificing going on. All of them have also been through, they have been fed a last meal, and they have been through very harsh violence before being put into the bogs. Even though to Tacitus it seems like, these people are being punished, the fact that they have been groomed, they have been packed in, they have been fed a last meal, they have been put over and over again in different ways into these bogs, and it says something, it's the same themes over and over again. When Tacitus wrote about these human sacrifices that was made in the bogs, he wrote from a point of view where human sacrificing had been illegal in Rome for hundreds of years. So that's his angle to these things. But the fact of the matter is that maybe for the Germanic tribes, this was more about sacrificing than punishing a criminal. And that's that about the bog bodies. Now let's travel to Skede mosse. We will now travel to Öland in Sweden, a little island outside of the east coast, where one of the biggest sacrificial bogs in Sweden can be found. By Skede mosse, as well as other places of similar sort, besides the sacrifices found at the bottom of these bodies of water, was also tiny white rocks that has been thrown in together with the sacrifices, which also makes it very clear that this is a ritualistic behavior. Times were harsh on Öland during the Iron Age, which can, amongst other things, be viewed through how much they have sacrificed. Thousands and thousands of different weapons were found in Skede mosse, as well as exclusive shields, as well as armor, horse equipment, etc. The sacrifices of weapons and armory here has been made during around 6 different times between the year 100 to 500 AD. And as I mentioned, these were exclusive weapons being sacrificed. Here is a sword made out of a walrus tusk. In ancient Scandinavia, the horse has been seen as a sacred animal able to travel between worlds. That's also why the horse has been used as a more exclusive type of sacrificial animal. The amount of horses found in this bog is many. As a matter of fact, the name Skede mosse is thought to have come from the word skid, a ritualistic horse racing mentioned in historical sources. Maybe these races took place here in context of a folk feast that then also included the sacrificing of the horses. Here, human sacrifices were made as well. As of today, we have found 38 individuals at Skede mosse, men, women, and children. All of them show, as in our earlier examples in this video, traces of heavy violence before they have been put into the bog. They seem to have been sacrificed at 2 different occasions. Once during the 400s BC, and then once again during the 600 to 750 AD somewhere. But mostly horses and cattle have been found as sacrifices in Skede mosse. And they were sacrificed around here for a span of 1,500 years. So this bog was used consistently for 1,500 years. That to me is a very strong ritualistic conviction to hold on to. Here, one of the biggest gold treasures in Sweden has been found as well. 1.5 kilograms in pure gold. So it was valuable metals and jewelry sacrificed here as well to whatever these people of the Scandinavian Iron Age believed in. These golden rings have probably been made on Öland. They were made around the year 200 and they are called snake head rings because of their stylized snake heads on the edge of them. These have never been used, probably because they were made with sacrifice in mind. Hidros is one of the most important archaeological sites in Sweden. I would dare to be so bold to say that. In order for us to get an important glimpse into the everyday conviction of the people alive during the Iron Age, as well as their personal belongings and, their values. Can you believe that the biggest lake on Öland used to be here? It's remarkable what time does to our earth. I wonder how it used to look here when these rituals took place. People have eaten the bone marrow of the horses and packed bones in packages of some kind and then put them into the water and into the bog, as well as seeing them sacrifice the metal connected to the gods, the gold. And then we have the 38 individuals. This is one of those places I have a hard time imagining a modern human being would have a way to cope with. It would have been awful to witness this part of the rituals. The only gold left here is now these yellow flowers. I wonder if these people's dream came true after all of their efforts and sacrifices were made. You would never suspect this site to be as dramatic as it actually feels like when you step around here. There is some kind of energy to this place. This is not the only sacrificial bog on Öland, but it is definitely the one that makes you hold your breath while taking it all in. Usually, I find it easy to connect with our human ancestors, to respect their wisdom and endurance and creativity. But when it comes to this topic, it leaves me with a bad taste in my mouth and my head is by default shaking slowly. In this aspect, we are very far apart. And even if there is a logic to sacrificing, if you try to put yourself into their positions, in the context and the norms and that society, they are still too far apart for me to grasp my head around it. And all of the violence seeping through this culture, how much worth does a human life have? I guess that depends on the crops the past years.